All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Rebel. This is episode 4 of Dialogue with Myself. I think I can kind of stick to the every other day schedule. Around 8 a.m. West Coast time is probably going to be my release date or my release time, just because that's 8 p.m. for me. Now it's easier for me to kind of manage. I hope everyone's doing well. It's start of a new week since I last spoke. I think I released the last episode on Sunday. Also, let me know, do people like having podcasts to watch on the weekend? I've noticed that most podcasts, sorry, you're gonna hear some clicking and clacking in the background. I know most podcasts that I know of don't release on the weekend, but I find that a bit odd because I know podcasts are kind of a weekday thing, like on the way to work or on the way to school or, on your way to your college class or whatever, type of thing. But I don't know. I'm a big proponent of releasing things on the weekend still. I think that, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you're releasing. But I just feel like most people want to watch stuff when they're off of work and school. But I've heard a few different, I guess, thoughts on it where it's like, yeah, but people don't want to, look at YouTube or listen to a podcast on the weekend. They want to watch their TV shows or their sports games and stuff. So I also get that point of view. I'm going to apologize again. I'm a bit sniffly again. The weather is changing. It's getting cold or colder. I don't really live in a place where it gets too cold in the winter. But the weather does change kind of dramatically. And so it usually gets you a bit sniffly. Anyway, I'm recording this a bit earlier than usual. Sorry, let me drink my coffee. Okay. I'm recording this a bit earlier in the day than usual, just because I have some stuff going on tonight, and tomorrow is my last final of the semester. And so I'm going to be a bit preoccupied with that. Excuse me. I'm going to be a bit preoccupied with that, so I wanted to record this one a bit earlier in the day. In other news, the CDL player, Call of Duty player that I talked about earlier named Pred, in the last episode, ended up kind of coming out and talking about why he left the team, or why, he got dropped. And I don't, in the last episode I talked about some of the rumors, and I try not to feed into those things, especially in stuff that I upload, regardless of like if 2 people watch it. I don't want to spread the wrong information. Even if, I would probably argue that most people that do listen to this podcast probably have no clue who this person is anyway. But I never want to spread like the wrong information. But he came out and he said it was basically just really personal stuff, and he couldn't really balance competing and, keeping his mental health in check and stuff like that. And I wanted to kind of talk about, I hate the word mental health, or the phrase mental health. I know that that's, a very common term for general, like, depression and anxiety and things like that. But I don't know, there's something about that word that I feel like maybe it's been a bit overused, and it seems like everyone's just talking about mental health. And I think that's a good thing. There's something about that phrase that I'm not a fan of. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think as a person who played video games for a long time, and a person who kind of found video games as an escape from personal issues, I think a lot of us do. Even I remember my mom telling me something like, people who play video games are less depressed because, like, there was a study where people who played X amount of video game hours a day actually ended up having lower levels of depression. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it, because this professional player even was like, when you're playing a game and you play for hours at a time, everything else in your life kind of goes away including your problems, where you kind of just, he was saying he would, show up for practice, play 6 hours, go to bed. And that was good enough for him to ignore, kind of the bigger personal issues in his life. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's a common thread between a lot of us. And I've also never heard someone who was, like a professional, I guess, video game player, right? Professional Call of Duty player, kind of say something like that. I think that was actually important because I don't think a lot of people talk about that. Like, I'm not saying every person who plays video games has this, but at least my generation that kind of grew up with the heyday of, or I'm a little bit weird because I grew up in a place where we were a little bit more behind in terms of the social aspect of video games, or like gaming and like nerdy stuff in general. I think the West caught on to that a lot earlier than the rest of the world did. At least from my perspective and the way I grew up. I kind of grew up in a weird thing where like playing video games wasn't cool for about half my life. And then for the second half, it was like the thing to do and everyone did it. And that was a weird kind of transition of public opinion where like when I was younger, I can kind of distinctly remember up until I was about 14, 15, basically when people started making a lot of money off of video games. Up until that point, for me, at least in my life, it was very much you probably shouldn't tell people that you're doing this. And, you're a nerd and you should, not be proud of it and you should kind of keep it to yourself. And then when I hit around 14, 15, and then it kind of all changed where everyone was like, oh, what kind of games you play? Oh, you play this? That's cool. And it changed a lot, at least in my experience. I'm sure it's different for everybody. And I'm a little bit older than maybe the average gamer now. I don't want to say that. I'm 23. No, I'm very close to being 23. I'm 23 in less than a month. And I noticed that, and I go to university, and I'm mostly older than everybody there, aside from like the seniors, and even some of the seniors I'm older. And they're all like, they play games, and it's not something that it's not something they're proud of, but it's not something they would hide either. But for me, when I was growing up, it was something that you were less comfortable sharing. And anyway, this all ties back to, a lot of people that I know, and myself included, I loved video games. I loved it. It was I don't know, it was the thing that I did. That was my thing. I played games. I was a nerd. I played games and I watched anime and read books and stuff like that. And I was just kind of a nerd. Like, that's just what I was. And I was a nerd, in my opinion, before being a nerd was cool, and that was kind of difficult. I'm not saying that in any like I was doing it before. I think it's awesome that everybody's able to just do this and it's cool and it's a normal thing. But when I was younger, there was a bit of shame to that aspect of it. That you were kind of shamed a little bit and you were kind of looked down upon because oh, you're wasting your life, you're doing nothing productive. And in my opinion, playing games is no different than watching a fucking Miami Vice or whatever your pick your poison in terms of entertainment. It's just a different thing. And I got into kind of competitive playing, which fed my, like, I'm a very competitive person. I've gotten better about it now where it doesn't like take over my life, but I used to be a very competitive person. I still am competitive, but more healthy, I would say, now. And that really filled a void for me in terms of, when we talk about that pro player kind of saying like, yeah, well, I just avoided all my personal problems because I just played all the time. I think a lot of people, and I'm not generalizing everyone, I'm sure there are people who are, who just casual, like play for an hour once in a while and it's a good time and whatever. But a lot of us, or, I'll speak just from my perspective. I'm sure other people feel the same way. Played games to avoid their problems. Games were my escape. That's what I did to kind of deal with how shitty life can be sometimes, you know, and I'm not saying that out of my life was not the worst by any means. There are obviously, you know, people who have way worse situations, and I'm not being ungrateful. I just think when you're younger, that whatever's going on in your life is like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And you don't have perspective on what's worse or what's not. That's just the worst thing you've had to deal with. So it affects you as the worst thing. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a death of a family member. It could be something a lot less, but it still affects you in a really negative way. And I use video games to escape that. And honestly, I'm really grateful for being able to do that, because man, I think for this professional player, it was a bit different where you're not acknowledging these things, and it probably wasn't healthy what I did growing up, you know, because I kind of, like this professional player said, like I kind of just avoided my personal problems by playing games, and I didn't address them. And, you know, I think when you're younger, you don't have the tools to deal with it. You don't have the perspective that life kind of brings you as you age to be able to deal with some of these really terrible things in your life and awful situations. So for me, you know, games were just like the fucking escape. And games and content creation, at least for me, it kind of spread into content creation at a very young age. But, you know, I think it was important that this person talked about it, because I think maybe people who have been through a similar thing where they do play games to avoid their life, or they can at least relate to that, it's important to have somebody in a position of not fame, but, you know, notoriety and, exceptional talent kind of share that, because I think a lot of people feel alone in that. You know, I think a lot of people, at least I know I did, like I thought that me playing games to avoid my problems, which I actually was lucky enough to recognize at an early age. Like I knew that I wanted to play my games because I loved the games and it was fun, but I also didn't want to leave my room. You know, like I also didn't want to deal with the things outside of my door. So, sorry, I got kind of lost on a tangent there, but I think that was important, because I think I felt a bit alone in that, where I would play and, you know, you never think that anybody else is going through the same thing that you're going through. And I don't mean to turn this into like a mental health podcast. That's not my point. But I think it's important to talk about, because a lot of people are playing games just to avoid their situation. You know, it's really difficult to be happy. Like I know that sounds really jaded and negative, and this may be just my perspective. Again, I'm not trying to generalize everybody. Like I have my perspective, and that's my perspective, and if you don't like it, then, you know, share your perspective. I'm open to hear it, but excuse me. I felt very alone in that, you know, I didn't think that anybody else was on the game or keeping themselves entertained for the same reasons. And then, you know, later in life, I kind of found out that we all, at least the people that I know, we all kind of did the same thing, where we all had, you know, personal issues or a family life that we didn't like, or, you know, even a death in the family or something like that. And we all kind of went to video games because that was our, you know, I don't want to say safe place, but like that was the place we could go, where we knew like we could go and our problems would kind of disappear for the time being, and we could all have fun and play games and have a good time, you know, and laugh. I think, I don't know, I was a very weird, I think, teenager and kid, where like I had a very negative worldview, and I was so just like jaded and like disappointed by a lot of things. And so for me to be able to go and just have a place that I could laugh was really important. And, you know, looking back in hindsight, like that was really important to me. It's still important to me that I have a place that I know I can go and smile and laugh, because that, you know, as you get older, depending on who you are, it kind of becomes more and more difficult to to find that, you know, and I'm sure everybody has their version of it, but it gets more and more difficult the more responsibility you have and the more pressures you have, and the more fucked up your family is and the more fucked up whatever is in your life, it becomes a bit more difficult the older you get. And I'm actually really grateful that I've had that outlet, because I don't know if some people aren't as lucky, to find a thing that they like and find a group that they fit in with, I've been very lucky to have really a core group of friends that I've known for almost a decade now. And we always, I don't know, I just know I can always go back to that, however bad it gets or rough it gets or stressful it gets, I can always go to them and I can rely on them to have a good time, and I hope that they can rely on me to have a good time as well. But anyway, that kind of took more chunk out of the time than I wanted to, but I think it was important to talk about. And yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's weird when you look back on how all of this kind of played out, or at least it is for me. You end up in very different places throughout your life. You end up in places that you couldn't even have imagined 5 years ago, let alone a decade ago. And if there is anybody excuse me, sorry, if there is anybody younger listening to this, don't worry about it, because man, there were so many times when I was 12, 13, even as young as 8. I won't go into why. It's just all you need to know is it was rough. And there were so many times where I didn't see a future for myself. I think it's hard as a kid too, because you don't really know what you want, and you don't really know who you are yet, and you don't know what you like. And man, there were so many times when I was a kid where I just was lost. I was just like, what do I do? What do I do now? What's the next step? I have no clue. And I don't know. I wish I could go back and tell that 13-year-old, 14-year-old, even fucking 16-year-old, they're hey, you'll figure it out. It'll be all right. Problems are so cyclical. A problem goes away and another one kind of comes up. That's just how life is. But yeah, I hope if there's anyone younger listening, I hope you know that it's all right and it'll be fine. Because man, I probably could have used that when I was younger. I probably could have used more, I guess, positive trust, if that makes sense. More people telling me hey, you'll be okay. You don't have to freak out. It's all right. You'll be fine. You'll find your way at some point. It doesn't matter what age you are. You'll find it at some point. But anyway, let's get off the kind of mental health and depressing topics. I watched a new quote-unquote Christmas movie. I don't know if it was a Christmas movie. I think it was called Carry On. It had the guy from Kingsman in it, and Jason Bateman, which I had no clue he was in the movie. I didn't see him in any of the trailers leading up to it. It's a Netflix original, I think. And it was fine. It's weird. It's almost like some of these movies are loosely... the only Christmas thing about that movie was that they were supposed to be in December, and they played some Christmas songs. And that was basically the only Christmas aspects of that movie. I would argue they might have not even intended for that movie to come out when it came out, but they just sprinkled some Christmas things in post, Christmas songs and maybe some dubs in later. It's a movie about an airport security guy who kind of has to deal with I don't want to say the word. I don't know if I can even say the word on YouTube and on platforms, but a T word, a dangerous T word. And he kind of has to deal with being blackmailed almost, or they threaten his family's life and he has to allow this thing through luggage check. But it wasn't really a Christmas movie. It also took place in California. So it's it's not really a Christmas area. You know what I mean? Like they don't really get cold or anything. And it was just weird. But it had the guy from Kingsman, Jason Bateman, and of course it was like an action-y movie. But it was fun. It wasn't like great. I think I gave it like a 7. It was probably better than Red One. And it had a smaller budget for sure, but it was still a fun movie. Worth a watch if you're not deathly afraid of like flying and airports in general. I'm someone who, okay, this is going to sound maybe controversial or not, but I hate travel. I hate everything about travel. I hate flying. I hate going through security. I hate people. I hate how people are at airports. I hate everything about flying. But I happen to have to fly a lot, which sucks. But that movie just reminds me of airports, and I'm not a fan of airports. But anyway, it was a fine movie. It was kind of like it was a new take on I think they were trying to go for like a Die Hard type of movie, maybe a little bit. I mean, it's different, but I think they were like, hey, action movie in Christmas, but it wasn't really Christmassy at all. Which, I mean, I guess Die Hard wasn't like super Christmassy. It just kind of happened to take place in that time frame. But anyway, that's a new movie that I watched. I gave it like a 7. It was all right. Worth a watch if you're bored and like there's nothing to do. Give it a shot. But yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of new Christmas movies coming out now. I think we're kind of at the end of that cycle. I'm sure there's going to be a few movies that come out on Christmas Day. That's usually like a movie release date. But I don't think I think they've kind of went through the ringer. Sorry, I've recorded this way earlier than usual, so I'm a bit stuffy and tired. But yeah, I'm trying to think of. Let's see. This week it's December. Oh yeah, as I said earlier, I think I can kind of keep a every other day schedule for this. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep that, just because again I do have a bit of a busy next few months. Starting in January. I think January kind of starts my descent into madness in terms of travel. But I do hope to bring some guests on. I think I have a few people that I'm interested in having. I think I'll definitely try to bring Josh on, or Saucy. Try to talk to him for a bit. And maybe even Alex. I have a few friends that I've never really given the opportunity to be in content or like be on a type of thing like this. I don't know if they'd even be interested in it. But you know, the good thing about my friend group is we're kind of from different places and all walks of life. So I think it could be interesting to hear their perspective on things. And also we've been friends for so long. I feel like it'd be pretty natural to just talk for 20 minutes, or less, whatever they want to do, you know? But yeah, I have some people that I'm lined up, and I also have some other ideas that I want to kind of try out with this podcasting thing. Because I think for me, podcasting is a great happy medium between, like, I am able to talk about games, but also other stuff, and it's easy for me to kind of do. I know that sounds like a bit fucked up, that like, oh, it's easy for me to do, so I'll just do it. But it is a lot easier for me to handle a once every other day podcast for 20-25 minutes. It's a lot easier for me to deal with right now. I hope to get back to the streams and stuff. The Subnautica streams are doing great, you know, in terms of like, people are watching the live stream after it's live, which I've never really had before. And in terms of like that much watch time, I know like Twitch doesn't really have the same statistics for you to look at that YouTube does. So maybe my Twitch VODs always have done that, but the YouTube VODs are doing really well, and people seem to be watching them for hours. Like my average view time went from like 10 minutes to an hour, which is kind of insane. I don't think I've ever had that high of a view time, probably because I just never did streams on YouTube before. But yeah, I hope to do some more maybe Subnautica streams and stuff. I get a bit worried about stuff like that because I don't want to be boxed in to playing a specific game. I know that sounds stupid because it's like, hey, if this is working, just do it. But I hate the idea of like, I play Subnautica for a week. I do like a week of Subnautica streams, and then I stream something else and nobody watches. Like, that's a big fear for me, that I'm going to be stuck in this like Subnautica box. I know it's really dumb, but I don't know. I don't want to get stuck in that, which I think is why I'm kind of doing the podcast too and uploading that to this channel, because I want people to kind of see that I make other types of content. I don't want it to be like this, I play this game specifically all the time. I want it to be a variety, you know, where people can kind of see that I do a bunch of different stuff. But I know that's not very popular on YouTube right now. In terms of algorithm and stuff, you're supposed to stay in your lane, which I talked about in the first episode, so I won't get too deep into it this time, but it doesn't help you out, that's for sure. But anyway, we're at our time. I talked a lot about mental health. I hope that wasn't too depressing, but I will see you guys on, let's see, this should come out on the 16th of December at 8 a.m. I will see you guys on a Wednesday. December 18th is the next time that this should come out. I'm hoping. Again, I have a final on Tuesday, so don't hold me to it too much, but that's the plan if you've made it this far into the video. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good week and had a good start to your week, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.